Hello, my name is Julie Tserambides, and I'm the Director for Advanced Practice Providers here at Akron Children's Hospital. I'm going to share with you today a quality improvement project that myself and my colleagues embarked upon approximately 2 years ago here at the organization. Our goal was to leverage the electronic medical record to create a standardized process for tracking of advanced practice providers' clinical privileges from a manual process at the time to a standardized reporting metric. We hope you will learn from this poster presentation and be able to utilize the information in the understanding of how to develop and implement a standardized tracking mechanism, leveraging your EMR to monitor any privileges that are of non-core standards that are carried by advanced practice providers or anyone in your medical staff for that matter. The information obtained from the tracking tool has allowed our medical staff leadership to monitor and ensure clinical competency and to provide more meaningful data to utilize in our professional practice evaluation models, as well as this is a requirement from the Joint Commission. The purpose of our QI project was to create a standardized process to document and track non-core privileges that were carried by APPs in the EMR, as well as to improve capturing of data for attainment and maintenance of clinical privileges. How we did this was we created a mandatory education module that everyone had to review and complete. Our goal was 80% participation as a stretch measure. We estimated, even though we had unknown total accuracy, we estimated about a 20% accuracy capture rate in the manual process that we had previously had. Of course, if anyone chooses or does not utilize the EMR standard tracking tool that we have created, they must display a manual tracking log as was done previously. Completion of non-core privileges that were being documented. We began this process in the fall and we reviewed it 6 months. We now have 2 years worth of data. The primary aim of this QI project was to create a standardized process by which non-core privileges would be documented and then reported for APPs utilizing the EMR, and to have a standardized metric reporting for our professional practice evaluation process via the FPPE and the OPPE. The secondary aim was to identify clinical competency concerns while under what we call direct supervision, which is what is granted during initial attainment of a privilege, and then ongoing maintenance of competency issues during the ongoing professional practice evaluation process, which is every year, actually 2 times annually, that we track and measure this kind of work. Also to identify low volume privileges that are captured, but necessary for clinical practice that would then drive educational opportunities via direct patient care or even simulation. The significance of this project is great because the Joint Commission requires that an objective evidence-based process is used to grant or deny privileges and when renewing existing privileges. The Joint Commission mandates that organizations have a measure of these processes. So by tracking completion of a non-core procedure and/or privilege, we're able to ensure that our providers are competent and delivering evidence-based quality care. So previous state, as I aforementioned, was that most of these privileges were tracked manually via a log, and folks had to keep that log in their personal possession and then deliver them and be able to demonstrate threshold volume minimums as well as competency when they were getting reappointed. Now, this was difficult to track, as you can imagine. And also, there was no way to pull it automatically into the ongoing evaluation process, which is now on an electronic platform called Statit. So this was another manual piece that was running separately from our standardized reporting platform. So the goal was to improve tracking of these non-core privileges, and what we did was create a smart phrase. This smart phrase was titled .app non-core, and then a drop-down list does pull up with all of the non-core privileges that are carried by any APP in the organization. The smart form then includes all the necessary data elements that are required, including date, time the procedure being performed, whether it was under direct supervision, which is done during initial attainment, or independent practice on an ongoing manner. The supervising provider, whether that be another physician or another APP who carries that privilege. If the procedure was successful or not successful, and if there were or were not any complications. And then there's a free text element available for any additional information that could be documented. The importance is that the procedure frequency can determine clinical competency and skill or not, right? So we know that we require minimum thresholds for all of our procedures that are privileges, I should say. If you are granted a non-core privilege, there are documented thresholds that are required, and we have a policy for that. And documenting and tracking procedures that fall out of your core privileges is required for clinical competency and patient safety. That is a Joint Commission mandate. And then tracking successful procedures in the EMR is really helpful when it's time to re-grant your privileges at that reappointment cycle. So that smart phrase has been able to create a list of all non-core privileges that are carried. We were able to capture what are we doing most of and what are we doing least of. And then a lot of those data elements we can pull for a variety of reports as needed. What we asked our IT department was to then create a clarity report that comes monthly, delivered to the medical staff office, the APP director, and the credentialing committee. This data clarity report is also then drilled down to the individual provider by name and put into their status profile, which is our online platform for our professional practice evaluation. And so any provider at any time can go in to their own status profile, look at their name, click on any privileges that are non-core to them, and see how many they have done and how well they did those. That also helps people know if they need to get more experience, or they need to get more patients, or if they need to get to the simulation center to meet those thresholds, as outlined in our policy for reappointment, as well as for attainment when it's time then to get it under independent, to receive the privilege with independent practice. You can also utilize the clarity report inside the status profile to compare yourself to the other colleagues who have similar privileges. We can track additional trends and hopefully even more. So in current state, post-implementation, we have successfully completed 4 PDSA cycles to understand what we needed to adjust, reevaluate, or redo, and things have definitely come up. For example, one thing that was identified was, how does a person who carries a privilege, who is supervising a person trying to obtain the privilege, receive credit if they're always supervising and they still need to show their minimum thresholds in a reappointment cycle? So what we came to a consensus with our medical staff leadership was that both parties complete the SMART phrase. The person supervising the privilege completes the SMART phrase with independent practice and shares how that went, because someone who is supervising a privilege carried out by another provider must be able and competent to step in and complete it. The person who is trying to attain the privilege is completing the SMART phrase under direct supervision. The MRN number is trackable. All the data elements in the SMART form, again, are able to be pulled out singularly. Additionally, in some future state, we are looking to utilize the data as an assessment of needs for competency maintenance and any other steps to help our providers in identifying those and obtaining those, and also to identify relationships between volume and clinical outcomes, meaning things that are not done very frequently but are necessary for practice. How can we ensure competence by providers across the board to ensure appropriate, safe clinical outcomes? We know that this quality improvement project can be extrapolated to any other medical staff provider, including our physician colleagues, trainees, or others who need to create some standardized tool, how to leverage your electronic medical record. And I hope that this information was meaningful to you and helps understand how we went from a manual system to an automatic tracking recording. Thank you.